give it a couple minutes here before we officially get started. We've got a handful more people registered that there are in the meeting at the moment, so stay tuned and we'll get started in just a few minutes. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. Thanks for joining. Welcome to webinar series number 7. Today we're going to be talking about policy and procedure management in SharePoint with the ultimate goal of how to centralize, automate, and stay compliant while using SharePoint as our single source of truth for your organization's policies and procedures. My name is Zach Welding. I am a senior Microsoft 365 solutions architect, and with me is Dave Kleist. He is BlueNet's Director of Operations. So what we're going to go over today, we're going to kind of talk about the problems that we've seen over the years when running into issues with policies and procedures. This could also be translated into other types of documents. Policies and procedures seems to be one of the more common ones. What the shift to the right approach looks like, what that new structure is, what some of the core capabilities are, how we can use automation to help make this process even smoother, how do we get our users to adopt this, and then a brief demo. So what have we seen? The problem. Typically, policies don't usually sit in a centralized location. What we've seen across the board is that they sit on like a link farm page, I like to call it. So a big organized, categorized manual page that gets maintained via text, right? Document changes or moves locations, somebody has to go and update that link. Not very efficient. There's no life cycle behind it. Maintenance is manual, and it kind of works until somebody forgets about it. We also see that files are scattered across different types of files. There could be Word, PDF, maybe a PowerPoint, Excel thrown in there. They're spread across multiple shared drives, maybe via email. There's multiple copies rolling around. Nobody really knows which one is current. Somebody might download a copy of one of these files and the file name doesn't have a naming convention, and it's got, policy number 2, version 73, final. not really sure if that's actually the final version or not. Review tracking. There's typically not any formal process for tracking reviews. Say you have a requirement where these things need to be reviewed every 3 years. Maintaining a link farm and having the documents live all over the place isn't going to give you a great opportunity to structure any type of review tracking like that. And then approval blind spots. Again, storing links on a page, how do you record who kept track of that approval? How do you ensure that that document went through the proper approval? If documents are stored in multiple different locations, how do you know that all these different departments are following the same process? So there's really no durable record of who approved what and when by using that way. So confusion, wasted time, an audit risk, that is what the solution is aiming to solve. So what does that shift look like? Shifting from a link farm to a single source of truth. As I mentioned before, typically what we see, maybe a categorized page full of hyperlinks. There might be some manual dates typed in for when something was reviewed. There's manual signature chasing. No real formal process to show or prove what was approved when. There's no version history, no audit trail. And some of these reviews, like the last time it was reviewed, is likely kept track of in someone's head. Maybe they're keeping an extra spreadsheet around. But again, that's 2 things that you have to maintain now when something is updated. So what are we looking to get to? A SharePoint library that is in a single source of truth. We use metadata driven views and filters instead of folders. We've got multiple levels of approvals and automatic version history that happens by default with SharePoint. And we can create an automated 3-year review reminder. So same authoring experience. We're not changing the way how people write policies. They still author the policies the same way. SharePoint just wraps structure, security, and end user searchability around them. Here's an example of what that could look like. This is what a link farm, in my mind, what I've seen. So this is just a basic SharePoint page with text web parts on it. Somebody manually came in here and typed this out, manually typed out the link, pasted the link in there. They manually pasted the next review date. So again, it works until somebody forgets to go and update this page in addition to actually changing the document. What that can look like in SharePoint, like I said, I'll go over a full demo of this at the end. This is an example, a small snippet of what the end user would see in SharePoint. This is using a bind tuning web part. So we've got a library web part here with a bunch of filters across the top and a search box. That search box is scoped to just the policies and procedures. End users can come in here and search. If they know that they're looking for something in the lab department, they could click that button and only see those procedures and policies. So how do we actually organize that? Like I mentioned before, we would recommend using metadata over folders. And the main reason for that is so that we have the flexibility to offer a single source of truth to multiple audiences. The people who are reviewing files, the people who are working on files, and the people that actually go and look up these policies to see what they say, probably all search and look for these files in a different way. Somebody who's coming in here to see, hey, what's currently being reviewed? What's currently in draft mode? An end user probably doesn't care to do that. So by using metadata and views in the back end, we can have one single source of truth and allow every single type of user to see the content that they want without having to recreate anything. So the screenshot on the right shows an example of how the files can be grouped by the approval status. So from an auditor or a overall content owner, they have a quick and easy way to come in and see how many documents are in draft mode, how many are pending, all of them that are approved. They could scroll over to the right and see more information about, what is the status, what step of the approval is that document at? And again, we'll go over all of that in the demo as well. So these views can replace the links page. We can group by the status, we could group by the department, we could sort by the most recently edited, we could do a view to show outdated ones, maybe ones where the next review date is less than today. So unlimited ways to sort and filter these things based on the type of user that is going to be looking at the file. So employees can filter and search instead of scrolling through a linked list, and content owners have all the documents in one spot with a clear view of where each document is at. Some of the capabilities here, as I mentioned before, full version history. This is built in with SharePoint. Every time a file is modified, a new version is created. This solution specifically, we turned on minor versions and content approval. Those are two features that are built into SharePoint, which allows people who have edit rights to just simply open up the document, start making changes, and it automatically flips it to draft mode and starts keeping minor versions. The minute that happens, people who have read access, which would be the rest of the organization who consumes these policies and procedures, they only see the most recently published major version. So people can continue to use one single source of truth to make changes and work on documents while everybody else can still see the last published version. This version history is accessible over time. So if you needed to go back and see what file was in place on a certain date, all of that is available to people who have the proper permissions. You can create exceptions. So if there's an exception, in this case, there was a type of file within a certain department that needed to have separate approval process. So based on the metadata, we're not relying on somebody to remember to send it differently or to, send it to a different email. It just happens because of the way the metadata is structured. We can create those exceptions in the back end to happen reliably. And then this screenshot here just demonstrates the latest approval details. Again, with these views, you can decide what columns you want to show and where you want to show them. This just gives you a quick glance if somebody wanted to see all of the details from the most recent time that that file was approved. Automation. So lots of different automation opportunities here. Obviously, we have the main one, the approval automation, and the acknowledgement of when the policy was approved. So the way that the process works for these guys, as I mentioned, they're using the content approval function right within SharePoint. So the minute one of the people who have access to make changes makes changes, it flips it into draft mode. They have a button that then shows up once it goes into draft mode for them to submit it. And then based on the number of approvers that are listed, which I'll show in the demo, it'll follow that process and send an individual approval to each one sequentially until all of the approvers have approved. Once that's done, it would go to a final approver. The job of that person is to go through, they have track changes turned on. They would go through, resolve all of the comments, make sure that the document's fully polished and ready to go. And then once they complete their approval, the automation would then adjust the content approval status and then publish the most recent version with all of those comments along with it. They also have another workflow built to send 3-year review reminders. So every day a workflow would go through, scan all of the documents, get anything where review, maybe the next 30 days. I think they have 30, 60, and 90. So if it finds any documents with the next review date within 30 days, it would send an email. If it finds one within 60, 90, overdue, whatever cadence would be part of the requirements that can be achieved with Power Automate. So less manual chasing, we got stronger accountability, and again, the main point here is to keep everything in one governed spot. So how do we adopt this? We did research and talked to different subject matter experts to figure out, how do end users search for these things? They sent out a poll to find common policies, most popular policies, to find out how people were searching for these things. So we could cater those views to make sure that it gave end users the quickest results that they needed when they were looking for the policies that they were looking for. Naming conventions, by using SharePoint, you don't need to say policy number 1, version 2, final, date, extra, final, right? Version history is kept automatically, and file names can be created with user friendliness in mind. We also have a landing page, which I'll show, that gives users resources on how to look for files. There's even a form if they wanted to submit a form to request a new policy. Everything's in one spot. By using SharePoint, governance kind of happens by design. We have permissions set so that only a handful of people can make changes to these policies. Everybody else has read-only access. There's no exceptions. They thought about giving unique access to certain approvers based on the documents, which you could do with Power Automate. That comes with risks and potential fragileness. So they ultimately opted to just have a set of, like I said, 5 to 6 people that can make changes to any of these policies and procedures and go with that. So we've got one centralized repository, better compliance, stronger governance, and users spend less time hunting for the files that they want to find. All right, before we get into that, let me share a demo and walkthrough of how this actually looks in practice here. Let me grab the right window. Okay, so this lives within their intranet. So they've got a separate callout on their global navigation, which is accessible anywhere. So this doesn't change. It's always here front and center. We've got a landing page that lets them do a couple different things here. This will take us to the back end of the library, which, because of the way SharePoint works, it's okay to give end users access to that. They have read-only access. They're not gonna be able to make any changes to anything. Here's the web part I was telling you about and that we showed in that screenshot. This is using bind tuning. So if you wanted something like this, it's not gonna be available out of the box. There is a library web part that SharePoint has out of the box. It's just not this robust. So if I wanted to go through and see policies for lab, I can do that. You can see we chose the most important columns to show here. There's lots more columns in the back end with all the approvers and all that stuff. But from an end user perspective, we only need to show them the file name, policy number, the department, and the unit. So this is a multi-select if I wanted to select multiple at a time, or if I just simply wanted to look at all of them, I can do that too. Once you click on something, it opens up in a modal window, which is nice. It's not taking you out of the context of the page, and it'll display right here. I have edit rights, so it's trying to open it up in edit mode. Everybody else would have view only, so it would open it up in Word Reader. That was one of the bigger shifts that they made. They used to keep track of all this stuff. They kept 2 versions. They kept a Word version and a PDF version. By using SharePoint, they were able to just maintain one. They make changes in Word. End users only have read. Really no need to have a formal PDF. I guess this did open up in the read-only version, so that's great. From a back-end perspective, as I mentioned, lots of different views. So just a view that's literally got everything in it. You can see here all the different columns, not really organized here. This is just kind of a catch-all view. Here's the view that content approvers and reviewers would use. It's got everything grouped by the status. You can see we've got some conditional formatting applied to different columns. So if something is overdue, it's red. I can quickly go in and see, hey, what are people working on right now? None of these have been submitted for approval. Here you can see the button that exists that they can click on when they're ready to submit it. If we scroll over, you can see documents can have different levels of approvers. Looks like all these ones have 2. Some of them have an extra person from quality that gets applied. There's the minor version that I talked about when they're in draft mode. So when somebody's ready to submit one of these, they click Start Approval, and this brings up a intake form that comes from Power Automate to ask them a couple more questions before they submit it. I believe it asks for comments that you might want to send to the approvers. Since this is a live demo, obviously it's going to ask me to do extra things because that's just how it works. All right, this is the screen. So just a comments box. So anything I type in here, maybe there's one section that I specifically want that approver to look at. I can type something up here. The approval that they get via email would then have that front and center for them to see before they review it. This button only shows up when the status is draft. As you can see down here, that button's not even there. These have already been submitted. So we've got an extra step where we keep track of what step of the process it's in. So every time an approval is complete, the automation would then write back that that one is done. So this one, for example, it's pending approver 2. So you could go over and see who that is, and then you could, if you needed to reach out and say, hey, where are we at? When is this going to be approved? All of that stuff is tracked and available for these guys to see. Maybe you don't want to see all of these extra columns in here and you just want to see stuff grouped by status. You can see I created a separate view, approve, reject, min, like a minimized version. So this one just has all the approvers in it. I don't have any of the extra fields in there. Here, if I wanted to look by category. So you have the ability to create views to cater towards different users' needs. That's the ultimate goal. One stop, one spot for everything, and everybody gets to enjoy the benefits of SharePoint. Let me go back and bring the slideshow up. Feel free to, if you have any questions, to use the Q&A section within the meeting, and we can answer any questions you guys might have. While you guys are maybe typing or not, just a couple extra things I thought of too. Implementation for something like this, it ultimately depends on how many requirements you guys have defined before we start looking at it. If you've got stuff already stored, maybe you're using folders and it is in one spot already, that's typically pretty easy to transition into a solution like this. If you don't have anything, then some discovery sessions need to happen to figure out, again, we got to think of it from an end user perspective. How do these guys want to find files? Do all of the policies and procedures, regardless of what department they live in, can they follow the same approval process? That was a few of the paths we went down with that project. Ultimately, we landed on one process for everything except for that one exception, but the initial thought was that they might want to have different steps for different types of documents. But as we worked through the process, they ultimately realized they didn't need to do that. As for licensing, everything that was shown here, except for that landing page with the bind tuning web part, can all be done with the licensing that you guys likely already have with Microsoft 365, nothing extra. Nothing popping up in here. The webinar will be available on our YouTube channel within the next week. If you guys have any questions, you guys have anything like this, and you're curious if, what it would look like for you guys, feel free to reach out. Our emails and our sales number is on the screen. And if there's nothing else, we'll end with that. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.